morning, St. Stephen. Hope you've been wearing your mask and staying safe and staying healthy as well. This week for our devotion, I just wanted to take a quick look at some of the texts that are coming up for this Sunday. The first text that we're going to hear from is the gospel text. It's called the parable of the mustard seed, and it comes in that chapter 13 of Matthew, where we spent so much time digging in the dirt, it seems like, through these parables and stories, these earthy parables and stories that Jesus has been telling us. The second text that I want to lift up comes from Paul's letter to the Romans. And Paul, this missionary, now a missionary for 20 years at the time that this writing happens, he's writing from Corinth, just kind of south and west of Athens, back to this church that he had begun in Rome. And what's happened at the church in Rome is that there's been transition, there's been change, just as there has been transition and change in Paul's life. And the transition that's happened in that church is that 8 years prior to Paul's writing of this letter, Emperor Claudius in Rome decided to expel all of the Jews, including the Jewish Christians, from Rome. Well, 8 years later, now Claudius has died, and so they came back to this community, to Rome, back to their church, and it was now completely a Gentile or Greek Christian church. And so there was this natural tension that would happen in the midst of that. So Paul, coming back, as he's in this point in his ministry, he has some things he still wants to accomplish, but he realizes he needs to be very clear about what it was that brought about this missionary church in the first place. And if you look back in the book of Romans, the reason that it was so important to Martin Luther's understanding of the Reformation was this one little verse in chapter 1 about faith. And in chapter 1, Martin Luther read these words that changed his life. He said, "For it is in the righteousness of God is revealed through faith for faith." Get this part, as it is written, "The one who is righteous will live by faith." The good news of Jesus is that powerful message that saves everyone who believes. And that's what shows up in chapter 8 as well. And he decides that it's time to reiterate that faith. And I love how he begins this portion that we're going to hear this week on Sunday. It begins like this. Verse 26 of chapter 8. Paul writes, "Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we ought, but that very Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words." With sighs too deep for words. Hasn't that been our sense lately in these last 4 months of isolation, of confusion, of wondering, of loss, of fear? There is transition happening all around us, just like in Corinth, just like in Paul. And Paul encourages us to remember, to cling to what we already know. We know that with COVID still wreaking havoc on our world, difficult, hard decisions will be made and will have to be made. We know that with what's happened in the last few months around race, its privileges, its lack of in our world regarding skin color, difficult conversations, hopefully respectful conversations, are needed. Let's cling to Paul's words, those words that go like this. We know that all things work together for good for those who love God, those who are called according to God's purpose. That's having faith. That doesn't disregard listening to each other. That doesn't disregard acting when we need to. We know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to God's purpose. All things, all people. Stay safe, St. Stephen. Be healthy. Wear your mask and keep the faith.